when we launched the game and we saw that given the current CPIs and our LTV and our capacity to pivot the game or add features, it would not work. So a lot of people left and we're left with a core team, and we knew we had worked with a big team for 2 years on a single game. So we tried to have the opposite approach, which is working with much smaller team on much smaller timeline. And that's how we pivoted to success again.
Hi, I am Sophie Vaux, and this is the Rise and Play podcast. In the show, I sit down with influential thought leaders in the gaming industry to deconstruct how they create the best teams and company cultures in order to create the best games. Speaking to hundreds of game executives in the show, I have identified recurring patterns and mistakes that we all make in our leadership journey. Do you have to go through the same hurdles and make the same mistakes to learn too? You are not alone in this journey, and hopefully you can learn from a diverse range of seasoned leaders who already walked the talk. Every episode brings actionable insights and case studies that will help you improve your management skills, self-awareness, and empathic communication. Becoming a better leader starts with becoming a better human. Are you ready to unlock your full potential in life and business? Let's begin. Hi everyone, and welcome back to the Rise and Play podcast on this new series on change management. As I announced, on this series, I'm really focusing on the journey of the co-founders and the evolution of the company over a decade or transformational phase and scaling phase. And today I'm super pleased to have an old friend. I should remove old, but
It's been a few years.
Yes, a friend in games and also peer in the gaming industry. So Martial Valéry, who's the co-founder of OhBiBi. I really like the name, and we can talk about the background of the name, but I will not spoil it yet. So who is OhBiBi? A mobile video game studio whose mission is to build the hit games of tomorrow thanks to iconic and unique content. And among the most notable titles of OhBiBi is Frag Pro Shooter, which counts over 150 million players. And prior to OhBiBi, and this is how Martial and myself, we know each other, Martial was the creative director at Gameloft, where he notably co-created Minion Rush, which was the big title of Gameloft at the time, with 1 billion players, and as well as many other IPs at Gameloft and successful games. And Martial has been the co-founder of the Pro Evolution Society, PES, for the fans of football. A yearly event intended to promote progressive values within the video game industry. And I've been really proud to be part of a few sessions, very good content, very good leader on stage to talk about big meta trends of how we build game companies, the games we build in a more ethical and sustainable way. So thanks again for doing that. So welcome today, Martial, to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Sophie. Long-time listener, first-time caller, as they say. No, I'm very happy to be on the Rise and Play podcast. Proud and humbled by what you're doing and achieving this. So I'm really happy to be part of this journey with you. And again, we've known each other for quite a few years now. So
yes,
excited to exchange more.
Yeah. Well, I'm pretty sure there's always something I can know more about you, because it's not like I've talked to you every day for the past X years.
It's been even more than 10 years, actually.
Yeah.
Like 15 years or something.
Of the background, we've worked together at Gameloft, and actually Martial was also my buddy when I joined, actually. You were my buddy, office buddy, I think we call that. So it's been a while. But yeah, we've evolved in similar journeys, although different, very different. And I think we found each other in our personal journey and professional through the values on how to run a company and the things we care about over the wisdom and learning. And that's what we will talk about today. But before we get into that, maybe a quick background of what you've done before OhBiBi and maybe what led you to, I don't know if it was opportunistic or it was something that really was starting to form for you during the days at Gameloft to jump off and build your own company. Do you remember that time 10 years ago?
Yes, I think it's a long time ago. I do remember. So I started at Gameloft in 2008 as a producer, a line producer, even if it was not called like that at the time. And we were overviewing different game projects, different game teams, usually all over the world, and moved into what the creative department, which was basically 2 people, my current partner and myself. So working on all the IPs of the company, portfolio of games, the quality, working with creative directors for different studios. And when Stan left to create his own game, I took the reins and became the creative director for the whole company, which was super exciting and challenging. And I think that there were two issues with that. We could talk a lot about, but at the time it was a very exciting companies, but some things were quite strange. And among this thing, I was world creative director for a 7,000 people company, and I was not even 30. I basically made no game. I had just written emails and chat conversation about games. So even if I was somehow doing a decent job, there was a lot of imposter syndrome in myself. But I was like, I don't really know what I'm doing. It's not sustainable. I should try to find something else. And at the time, I wanted to continue doing mobile games, like with real people. And at the time in France, I wanted to stay in France and in Paris, and there was almost no mobile studio in France at this time. So the most logical next step for me was to create my own studio or start this entrepreneurial journey. And I did not think of myself as an entrepreneur back then, but that was like the most logical step in my career if I wanted to actually get into production, build teams, and really start working on games and not just sending emails about making games.
Yeah, I had a flashback very visually of how it was when I remember that time. So I was there while you were sharing the story. So it's still vivid in my memory. And I think you left before me.
1 month before you, I see. Something like that.
And I can relate a lot because I had the same thinking process that happened for me, although a different direction, where this uncomfortable feeling of imposture, where you are hiding behind a screen and you ask yourself, can I really develop a game or lead a team? Where it was a different setup of work. So I understand at the time where the things were all together. And also with Stan, you worked together for many years. And I assume you've enjoyed working together. So that must have been a factor as well to find some way to work again together. So this is also where I would like to focus my first question in kind of a foundation stage of a company, although you didn't think of it this way, like, oh, let's start a business and so on. But how did those conversations go at the time with Stan to be co-founders? Was it based on trust? I don't want to get too much in stereotype, but, I would say like kind of a German, more Nordic way, like everything is on paper legally and then we do things right.
Absolutely not. It was really based on trust. And I think I was very naive at the time, but I think it's a very positive feeling. I know I wanted to start this entrepreneurial journey. So my partner, Stanley, had left 1 or 2 years ago before me to create his own game. He started learning programming and he designed his own game himself and he did the graphics all by himself. It's really a creative powerhouse. And this game turned out to be Motor World Car Factory and he released it by himself and it was working well. There was already like some strong foundation. There were revenue, the company was profitable, it was okay. And I know I wanted to leave and then wanted to have a co-founder with him because he had this game, he had some success, but he wanted someone to work with him to try to scale this company. And we had not signed anything or there was not even a discussion about shares or anything like that. We just knew we wanted to have this entrepreneurial journey, even more interesting to make it together than doing it separately. So that was the basic foundation onto me. And I think it's also because I was relatively young. I was 30 and I was already a father, but I was like, okay, I'm not taking too many risks there. If this thing doesn't work out, I will start something by myself or try to find a new co-founder and evolution. So I was like, the learnings, the journey is more interesting than the risk that I'm not actually taking a risk. So I didn't want to over complexify stuff or make the beginning having start before. I think there was also, you also need to prove yourself. Even if you've worked together before, you have to take some risk as well. Mm-hmm. It's part of the entrepreneur journey. And, jumping in without having covered all the details is also part of this, I'm taking the risk with you. And either it works, either it doesn't work, but I'm not trying to come in as an employee.
Mm-hmm. I think it's refreshing to hear that where, I've heard more recently horror story. Maybe it's a bit of a stretch, but pretty bad story of co-founders where it didn't work out. And that's why I'm always interested in to hear also the good stories, like where it really started based on trust and even like I would say a good friendship, figuring out the details later. So that's a good case as well where you started. And I think here is very clear the case where you've complemented as well your strength and skills, because like you said, like you came in with a clear mission to scale a game that was already done, launched, showing like some traction. So then you started, and what were the first steps to scale your company? Your first employee, did you know that you wanted to hire more people or make the next games? Where did you start as you just jumped in?
We were extremely naive. And I think back then, there was not as many materials as we have today, or even entrepreneurship, at least in Europe, was not as common as it is today. So everything was a blank slate. And I think also coming from Gameloft, which was kind of a mess, in a way, a functional mess, but still I am no performance review over like 6 years of working at Gameloft. Nobody talked to me about my actual performance. I had hints that I was doing a good job, but that was really not clearly communicated to me. And even in terms of values and culture, there was no such thing, or there was stuff, but really like informal stuff. So we really came in with the idea, we'll have a game idea and hire some people and everything will be okay. And it will scale like instantly. It will be successful. So we really didn't know what we were doing, basically. So the first thing we did with this game was a local factory that was working pretty well, and that was a good proof of concept for the company or the future games we wanted to make. But we knew, or we thought, that the potential was limited, and we wanted to work on a bigger game and actually turn what was basically a one-man company into a real studio with real people. So we started looking for investors and trying to raise some money, to scale. And that we did successfully, because in 2014, we raised 3 million euros. And with that capacity to hire more people and work on a bigger, better game. And that bigger, better game be a game called Monster and Commander, kind of at the time RPG. I mean, RPG is still working pretty well, but there was Brave Frontier, if you remember that game, and Gumi was one of our investors, and that game was working very well. So we saw that as an indication that our previous game was a simulation in a fictional car factory. So that was like a big pivot, and that was made on Coco Studio by one guy. Oh. And then we pivoted to Unity. I think at peak, at the stage, we had like 25 people on this game. We spent 2 years working on this game, and that was a complete failure. I think the game cost us like 2 million euros, and we generated like 300k euro revenue, something like that. And everything was very painful. We had no clear talent strategy, no clear company mission or company culture or value. I hired a bunch of people to make the game. and it will be easy, but that was not easy. We made a ton of mistakes. Yeah, that was fun and not so fun, and not so fun times. But as you said before we started this call, I think some of the mistakes, even if you read about them, you actually need to make them to really understand the value of these mistakes and the lessons you learn from them. So good teachings, but it came at a cost.
The first phase of a company, I would say, where you get your first round of funding, and quite substantial at the time, right? Because 3 million is quite hard to get these days. So I can imagine for 2014 is like, wow, that's something. And it was with you, and maybe I don't know if you had contractors at the time, but what happens in your mind when you just receive, okay, the deal went through with investment, you have 3 million, where do you start? How did you think of spending the money? How did you scale? You even mentioned being 25 people. How did that happen? Who was in charge? Something for me to understand as well more, while reflecting maybe on some of the costs of those mistakes. What were the steps as well? How you decided to scale and pick that game? Yeah, spend those 2 million on the Monster and Commander. A Commander.
We have already started working on the game, and I think, again, we did not project anything. We tried to have like a very, feel sound management and not spend that money in a few months. I think something that was important to me, because I'm a risk taker, but I'm also risk averse. And so I always make sure to have several shots. So the important aspect for me was to make sure that the investments we were taking, it would last for a significant time, or that could live on that investment, not for 1 year, but maybe potentially 3, 4, 5 years, because I know that things can go wrong, even if we thought that everything would go right. That didn't. And then the two big mistakes was that I think with a game that was working well, we thought success was easy. The first game was working well, and we could repeat that success over and over, whatever the conditions, whatever the game genre, whatever the team, and everything would be successful from then. And which was not the case. And I think the first mistake we did, we were also working with a publisher, so that there were some strings attached. But if we had to repeat the story over, we would try to scale our successful game much more than what we had done, where we had taken success for granted, but we could have actually, done more for the success of these games. And the second mistake is that, at some point, when you're working, if you go on LinkedIn, you'll see everyone telling you if you raise money, it's not for a game, it's for a company. And we knew kind of that. But at the same time, when you're starting a game studio, you're building a company, but you also have to build a project. And it's very easy to mix the game and the studio. And even this message sometimes is contradictory, because when you start a game company, you need to start with one game. And that game, unless you're working hyper casual, where you're gonna do like 10 or hundreds of game concepts before finding success, very often that game will become the studio. Actually, still you have the capacity to have like several game tracks. But anyway, this being said, we're really just focused on building this new game, and that was kind of like our mistake, I think.
Mm-hmm. And you said like there was a moment after the launch of a game and then realization like it will not scale, it would not become a hit, or it will not surpass the first hit that you built that made basically OhBiBi like kind of an impulse. What were the signs and the signals like, okay, here we have to hit pause and kind of maybe rethink how we are doing things as a company, as co-founders? What were the signals for you?
I see the writing was on the wall, and throughout my career, I found out that projects or game development that is painful and is not enjoyable, usually it does not create a great game. And usually, successful games, everything is not easy. Everything is interesting and enjoyable, and you have fun. And when you don't have fun, when you're like, don't want to go to work, when talking to people in the team is painful / horrible, it's not going to make a great game. So even making the game, there was this feeling that it's probably not going to work, but we've gone this far, so let's finish it and see where it leads us. And then, when we launched the game and we saw that given the current CPIs and our LTV and our capacity to pivot the game or add features, it would not work. It was relatively easy and quick to come to this conclusion. And then, a lot of people left the company willingly, again, because the game had failed, and also because it was not a very pleasant experience for the people working. We were junior managers. We were obviously super stressed by what was happening. That was our first company, a lot of things we didn't know or could not do very well. So if OhBiBi alumni listening to this podcast, I apologize all the bad things we did. But yeah, so a lot of people left, and we're left with a core team, and we knew we had worked with a big team for 2 years on a single game, so we tried to have the opposite approach, which is working with much smaller team on much smaller timeline, and that's how we pivoted to success again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so let's get to that. So as that you had that time of transition, and I think, of course, when you look at your game success, it doesn't always signal that you have a dysfunctional company. I'm not saying it was the case here, but it's not always like linked. But definitely there's something in the way you do things where people don't want to stay. It's kind of a, of course, clear signal. I can imagine how painful that is as well for you as the co-founders, where you put a lot of effort and heart into building the company and things don't work out. And as you pivoted to smaller teams, smaller timelines, like you say, smaller experiments, let's call it this way, because these days it's a lot about testing right and testing quickly. How did you pivot a company culture with that as well? I don't know what was the company culture when you launched your second game, Monster and Commander. I think of Command and Conquer, I'm sorry, so that's why I'm mixing.
No.
And yeah, okay, people left. And how are they following kind of a ship going to a new direction that you're setting for the company and the future development framework, basically, you're having?
I think, again, everything was pretty organic at the time. What we knew, and we had come from this game where everything was kind of painful. Building the game was painful. Even the game was not really fun, and we were definitely not in love with our game. So I think the mantra at the time was really, we want to make a game that is fun and enjoyable, and the process of building it should be fun and enjoyable as well. And usually to have something fun and enjoyable, a lot of it comes through iterative process where you can actually have something quick, being focused really on the essential, the core components, and then it iterates through that and be able also to reach players in a fast fashion, and that it's very rewarding loop where you feel that what you're building is actually cool and meaningful, and that is also validated by player data. So really the goal was to come out of this long and painful journey and try to have this more nimble and fun process of building games. And that's how we made SUP multiplayer racing, and that was our next success.
I really like the game, and for me, not being like a racer player, it has that casual vibe and art direction that I could relate a lot to. I really like the color. So SUP was very vibrant. There's a lot of joy. You can feel that the team, at least, who is behind the game, had fun making it. That is definitely a change in the way you approach development. And at the time, when you launched SUP and probably also grew the game, how many were you, or how many are you as well today?
I'd say we were 15 at the time, 15 or 17.
Okay, so you stayed small.
So we went from almost 30 to 15, and we stayed that way for the whole launch, and we started to scale again after that. But I think one of the lessons, for entrepreneurs or for people making studios, there is a real value in being small and nimble. And that is also something we're trying to replicate now, even with like more teams working on more games, but having this small and core group of people for a significant amount of time of production, I think it is really important, because one, you can do it on mobile. It's not always the case when you're working on PC or console game, even if that could be debated. But it's so much more enjoyable. You can take more risk. You have more fluid communication within the team. You can rely on people of very strong competency to build a game, and with limited resources, you have to be creative and really focus on the essential part of your game. So even in terms of like project management, in a way, it's really useful, because the constraints usually drive the innovation, because you cannot do everything. So you have to find ways and solutions to still create big games, but with the limited resources you have. And usually that in video games, at least, it's a very powerful driver for fun and innovation.
Mm-hmm. That leads me to the question, when thinking of a bit of a fast forward to today, the past years, where we have met at several occasions talking about how hard it is to launch a new game, right? You know about that one. And repeating the success is very difficult, because you have a market, especially cost of acquisition, what people value as well, evolution of player needs. I don't know if you found it, but I'll ask anyway. What is it about OhBiBi that you would say is almost your competitive advantage, right? So the type of games, if it's type of games or the way of making games, that is really you. And that also comes from the co-founder, that you would be more willing or adequate to make than other mobile game companies of the same size, because there are quite many today. And that's also kind of the question I'm thinking of when seeing so many studios. Where do you focus? Like, it's overwhelming, right? You can do everything and nothing, and everything is difficult. So how do you navigate that when you decide what to explore next, especially with those multiple like small teams as you described?
Yeah, I think what makes us different is that at the same time, we're very creative-driven studio. It's not like we do 1 year market research before starting a new game. We do market research, and we know genre, and we know the competitive styles of game genres and all of that, but we try not to get lost too much in this. We also try to have like a very solid creative foundation behind the game, even if it's not always backed by consumer data or market data, and to have like really to come with like really unique proposition with our games. And I think all the games we've made so far, they've really been original games. When you play an OhBiBi game, you've not played a game like this before. Sometimes for the best, sometimes for the worst. But they're really original games. They're coming with genre conventions, and I know they're not created out of vacuum, but they're still like fresh propositions. And I think that's very important for us because we love games, and we came into game development because we love games. Our dream was not to become rich and famous. Otherwise, I think I would not do game development. It's maybe not the best option for that. So we want to leave a positive trace in terms of gaming culture, and that comes with like fresh and fun games that you have not played before. But then we also want to be very successful and to have a lot of players. So at the same time, we're also very business cautious and data driven, and we try to really mix these two aspects with this very creative side in terms of game design, but also art. Our games are very colorful. The universe are usually very unique and iconic, and at the same time to also build games that are, if not doomed for success, we have a very good chance of being successful and have the potential to become the hit games of tomorrow. With the Clash of Clans, the Clash Royale, the Candy Crush, the Pokemon Go. And I think one of the other things that makes us different is that we're not genre specialists. A lot of people will tell you that you need to specialize in one genre, and that is where the value is. And to some extent, we do some of that, but we also do a lot of different game genres. And I think that's also coming from Gameloft, because we have worked on so many games, so many genres. You can do different genres. It's okay. There are some learnings that can apply to different genres. And we also know that if you specialize in a genre, it's also to break out of this genre, and trends come and go. And you need also to be nimble and adaptable. We've done simulation, we've done racing, we've done shooting. We're doing idle now with a new game. And I think recently, in the latest year, the realization we had is that with Frag, we had 150 million players, but we didn't get $150 million revenue from that game. So we knew we had this capacity to build action multiplayer games in a very competitive way and to have like very successful traction with these games. That's something we did not want to lose. We also wanted to keep working on that legacy and that expertise. But we also knew that maybe that genre was not the most monetizing, or the audience was a bit harder to crack than an other genre. So we also wanted to work on a game that would be more casual, more accessible, and that maybe older audience where monetization would be better. And that's how we start working on Go Magnet in soft launch now in a few select territories. And the soft launch is working well.
Yeah. Well, it's super interesting that also, I don't believe there's just one way, by the way, for everyone, because the people who founded the company or the team behind the games, it's very different and unique. And the worst is, of course, when you are forced to work in a certain way for a certain type of games, it doesn't end well. So I agree that in the end, each company have to explore what works best for them. And I think definitely to also follow up on what you said, like what makes you stand out, I can say the USP of a game that you have created is very you. I can recognize, I don't know how to verbalize it, but there's something very colorful, very vibrant, joyful. It's also with a good humor. Yeah, I don't know how to explain like some life in the games as you create through Frag and the characters. I remember I saw the trailers and the teasers. There was a lot of good marketing, brand marketing around the game, and also like SUP, like I said. So definitely keeping that part, that soul of a game is, I think, quite rare to create in the space. But where the challenge is like incorporating back business and data, where you explain exactly. Maybe it's fun to work on a multiplayer shooter. It has a lot of traction. People come in and play in the game, but is there a business case here for us? Or how far do we need to go to monetize on the games, and exploring a bit like what works for you with the talents you have. So I'm curious as well. I'll check Go Magnet in soft launch and your first take in casual, because I come from casual and I'm always curious to try new casual games. So for that part, as we focused on the games, I want to focus the last part of the conversation today more on you as a the co-founder with Stan, and your personal journey, because 10 years ago, you explained how you started the company. You used the word like naive and let's go all in, let's build a company and everything will go right. Let's have our success. And it was very organic, as I understand, in your early years. But as you scale the company, hire more people, make your first mistakes, have several games in development, how did your role and even say your motivation to be the co-founder of OhBiBi has evolved over the past 10 years? Because I'm pretty sure you've done quite many different things over the past 10 years.
I think one of the joy of being an entrepreneur is that you go through a lot of different jobs that you will not have done. Being the CMO, the CFO, the creative director, the chief data officer as well. I learned SQL and I built the data pack. So that is kind of crazy. And I think reflecting back in the last years, I think the goal, at least for me, was also trying to reconnect to myself, my values, and make sure the company is really aligned with that. And I think starting the company, you know yourself, but at some point, it's not that you become the villain of the story, but almost because you're in such a stressful environment and you're trying to make everything, work and stand together, and, you're not thinking super clearly. It was really about trying to bring back our values, our personal values to OhBiBi and make sure everything was aligned, and we worked a lot on transparency, on boldness, collaboration, the thing that, actually building a company you'd like to work for, and not what the company is, but trying to build this dream company that you actually wanted to create, but you did not have the confidence to try to achieve that when you started. And after a few years, you realize that it's the only way forward, and that will make the company better.
Mm-hmm. I think it also comes through just a personal journey where the more you know yourself, and at some point it just costs so much energy to do things that are misaligned with your inner values. So it makes also your life easier, as it's your own company, to shape it with the principles and the ways of working that you believe in. And I'm pretty sure they will evolve as well. But then there are so many things to worry about that at least you don't have to worry about not being yourself, especially in your own company, right?
Yeah, but it's funny because the company really quickly can become this thing that is not you anymore. And you're like, well, why is that? So where did it go? So that I don't feel like I'm kind of alien with the company that you started, that you have ultimate power to do everything you want, but you feel kind of trapped at some point. It's weird, but I think it's a lot about also experience and feeling confident about the things you can do.
And so today, what is it that you're focusing on, and how do you split your responsibilities with Stan, your co-founder?
I think Stan really is a game maker. Stan creates a game, and Stan today is working in Gogo Magnet. That is sole focus. And for me, a lot of different ads at OhBiBi these days. I think one of the things that I missed at some point was there was a point where I was a bit far from game development, because you have to structure the company, and then you also have to scale the game. So you spend some time with marketing, with data, and that takes a lot of time, and that is an entire job out of itself. And you have hiring to do and all of this. Being able to scale the company, to structure the company, I've been able to come back to game development, if not fully, at least partially, and maybe gone back too much to game development. So now I need to take some step back from that again. But that was really joyful time for me as well, because I started game development because I wanted to be in game development, and being too far away from that was something missing, at least for me. And now these days I'm basically navigating with all the business of running a company plus running game teams and trying to come up with games. So I'm a bit all over the place, but I think that's also where I like to be, and also making sure not to be too involved, because when you start to be too involved, then that takes autonomy and responsibility from the team. So it's a delicate balance to find. And I think at some point, one of our mistakes was you read about Supercell and how game teams need to work on their things, and you leave them alone. But what I didn't realize, there is a very Nordic aspect to that. And, based on different countries, different locals, different culture, it's not always a perfect solution for game teams. And some teams, they want some guidance, they want some help, and they want them to make sure they're doing good work. And especially in France, where we have talents, but we don't have any big mobile studio. A lot of people who come in, they're either very experienced, but more from the console and PC game, or they are more junior people. So they will need some guidance in the mobile free-to-play business. If you're not able to give that, it will be an issue for the team and for the games. But then you don't want to give too much, because if you want to give too much, then, a lot of cities rely on you, or you should be able to distribute your time evenly among different fields. And then the team is also lacking in autonomy and in ability to take decisions on its own. So delicate thing, but funny thing. And I think we're in a much better position these days to handle this complexity than we were a few years before.
And something to celebrate, at least with this conversation today, is a decade of a company, because not all the companies make it to sometimes even 3 years after, like we see as well, like some studio closing after their seed round. So I think here celebrating like the test of time is the success in itself. So by staying in the game, I often say we are competing to win the game, but in the end, staying in the game is already kind of a win, right? So I think here, it sounds like great, exciting what you're going for, and as well this evolution of roles. And you will make future mistakes as well, but you have better tools, I think, now with the past. And it's a trial and error process all the time. And that wouldn't be anyway that fun if it stays static forever. And it can't be anyway in this market.
Yeah, and I think one thing we really believe in is that it's a long game. And I think when you've started working in game development, most people, they will work in game development for the entirety of their life, or at least that's really my motivation, my mantra. I have dreams of opening a restaurant, but I know I will never do it because it's too hard.
Yeah.
I know that I will stay in game development for my entire life. If not at OhBiBi, in a new journey, whatever that journey is, everything we're building is actually, leading to the future of our career or people's career in game development. So trying to have this very long-term perspective and trying to make sure that you're actually building for the long term is really important for us. We have hired some people very recently that took us 10 years to hire them. Like, I think we start, and that is incredible.
Wow.
And seeing that, the small steps you've built with them years ago, it comes to fruition, only now. It's amazing. It's amazing to reflect. It's amazing to have been able to achieve that because you've grown and now you've finally at a stage where you can actually hire these people and have them come to your company. So very lucky to experience that. A big source of joy also to be working with amazing people and able to hire these amazing people to come and work with you.
Yes. And I can feel a lot of that joy. And I think this is, although not verbalized, this is so a part of the things I feel about the culture at OhBiBi. I mean, I visited the office and I know you, I know Stan, I know some people now, quite familiar faces as well working there. So I can feel like some culture and energy and in all the things you share today. And my last question, maybe this is one that crystallizes the culture of a company at a certain time, is for people who want to join you now or tomorrow, I don't know, what is the kind of profile or working style that works well at OhBiBi? If you have a few things you could share.
We like people who are kind of versatile. Even, if we hire very specialized jobs, I think we're always happy to hear about people who's kind of like T-shaped, with some very, very strong expertise in a specific field, but still open to have a good understanding of the broader field of their either specialties or game development, or who can do, if not who can do, we have this like attitude of how we'll be able to work on different things. And what I enjoy is the work with the team, making a project successful. And that is more important to me than really trying to own my skills on a very specific topic. I think we're very iterative company. We try to go fast, very tangible stuff quite quickly, and that can be fun and very rewarding for some people. The cost of that is that sometimes we try to keep this kind of like garage culture, not a very established process for teams, and this kind of like organic way of doing games. And for some people, it's super cool and that's what they like. For some people, it's a bit more difficult because they like a tighter process. And I think there is a real value when staying on the edge between chaos and organization. If it's too chaotic, it's a mess. If it's too organized, I think it's not always great unless you have like a super successful game that you're trying to optimize, or you have a very definitive playbook on how to make games where organization becomes the prime value. But when you're still trying to hit for the next step to be on this very thin line between chaos and organization is very valuable. And we try to work with people where we're basically really nice.
Yeah.
And sometimes we wonder if people are not too nice because and I think we're a bit beyond that, but at some point people would not dare challenge the work of their peers, and it's also can impact a project negatively because the quality might not be good enough. But in the long run, I think working with nice people in functional teams is just better. When we have people who are like really good and super smart and super nice. And I try not to buy into the, sometimes you have to be kind of an asshole to be really good. I've seen good assholes, but I also see, good, very nice people. And if these good, very nice people exist, I want to work in a company that is made of these good, very nice people. Mm-hmm. And they're as good, if not better, as the good assholes. So
yeah. All right. Well, I think that's good hints and tips. So some things that we talked about today about like the culture you have, and it's a lot in the end about the people. So for the listeners and people who think, oh, maybe I'm that person, or know someone who would like to join a cool French studio in a nice location in Paris, like in the city center, cool offices, and to meet OhBiBi, because we didn't talk about it today, but OhBiBi exists, then you can contact Martial after this episode, and I'll link as well your contact in the show notes. Well, thanks, Martial. Thanks for taking the time, sharing your learnings, your mistake, your fuck-ups. And I think they are important to be mentioned as well. And that's how we grow. So thanks a lot.
Thanks a ton, Sophie. Thanks for having me. And see you soon.
Yeah, take care. Bye-bye. Thanks for listening to this latest episode of the Rise and Play podcast. I am growing a community of conscious leaders across the industry and beyond. If you want to join this movement, please share the podcast with other conscious leaders because we have so much more we can learn from each other. If you've enjoyed this episode, please follow and rate the show on Spotify or your other favorite podcast platform. It will help other growing leaders to discover the show and benefit from the valuable insights. If you would like to grow rapidly your leadership skills, you can find more insights on riseandplay.io, where you will also find my free masterclass on conscious leadership and other resources that I offer. Have a great week, and remember to take care of yourself. Until the next time.